Greetings, developers and hackathon participants. We are in the midst of the Moralis Cronos Metaverse Gaming Hackathon, a huge event for all of us, I know, and it is time for the very first workshop of this event. So I hope everybody's very excited. I have Rick here with us from Cronos, ready to take us through a full workshop of how to use these technologies together to build great games. How do we get started? Where are the tips and tricks? That's what we're here to find out today. Thank you for joining us. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Rick to get us started with the workshop.
Cool. Cool. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for the introduction and really cool to be here. Really excited. Um,
Thank you for coming.
yeah, glad to be here. Just a quick introduction about myself. I'm actually the blockchain innovation engineer here at Kronos Labs. And yeah, today we have been preparing something really cool for you. So basically, what I want to walk you through today in this first workshop is we want to start with a minter app, to start to mint some base NFTs that could be possibly game items and the sorts. Then I want to show you actually how to implement this through Solidity. Then I want to show you a quick example application in Next.js. And finally, we want to have a look at how this is going to look in Unity if you want to, let's say, import some items. And if time permits, I also want to show you a quick video of a top-down RPG game on which I was working a couple of months ago. But yeah, why don't we just start? I think the first thing that I want to do is actually starting to share my screen and stop talking so much. Let me go ahead. So which screen is it? It's screen number 1 because I have more than one, as you can see.
Let's get
Um,
that added to the screen here. Now, if you're joining us, we are also in GatherTown. Please click the link in the description. We will be hosting question and answer here on YouTube after the workshop and in GatherTown following that. So I hope to see you one of those two places.
exactly. Also, another thing, if you wonder if you can, clone repos and stuff like this, we actually prepared a public repository which we'll be sharing with you, and which you could possibly also start to use after this first hackathon workshop. Okay, let's try to answer the first question first, what Kronos Play is. So in short, it is a collection of different SDKs which you as a game developer can use, to benefit for some client-side coding in Unity. We have been extensively working with ChainSafe to really start to be able to provide similar functionalities in the context of Kronos. So basically all the cool things that you can do within Unity games in combination with Kronos is something that you could possibly achieve by implementing the Kronos Play SDK in combination with other tools such as Moralis, the Moralis SDK, for example. I guess some of the key features is that obviously it's very easy to integrate Kronos Play on Kronos with really just a few lines of code in Unity. You can go and clone the repository or download the package, the Unity package, and then just get started. I invite you, when you have a moment after the workshops, to have a look at our documentation as well. It's quite native and easy to understand. You obviously have a chance, to get the sense of what Kronos Play is and how it works in order to connect to the Kronos network. But essentially, it will allow you to really connect and interact with all the Kronos networks, including the testnet. It will also provide in-game NFT functionality, such as importing NFTs, but also some additional stuff such as authenticating by using different crypto wallets. That could be, if you want to build something with a WebGL build, by using Wallet Connect, MetaMask, and all the other known wallets. As to the documentation, I'm not gonna deep dive too much into it because today it's more about how to use Cronos and Moralis. I just give you a quick overview of the different things that you can do. Obviously, in the context of Unity, you have a couple of examples in here. It really explains to you how to use the different RPC methods. If you want to use the RPC methods, it helps you step by step how to get started. It has also a guided, basically step-by-step guide with images and stuff like this. So it's pretty self-explanatory to go to this. And it also has a couple of example scripts that you can just go ahead and import into your Unity build. We have also a complete login example if that's something you want to explore. It's quite comprehensive and really easy to integrate with your existing builds as well. And another really cool stuff that I wanted to mention is we are now also supporting the Unreal Engine plugin. So if anyone here is interested, to learn a little bit more about what the team at Cronos is working on in regards to Unreal Engine, please feel free to have a look. We are always open also to get your feedback, your ideas, and always here to listen. If there's anything, feel free to reach out also afterwards in the Gathertown meeting as well as in the Discord channel. Okay, so next thing that I wanted to show you is actually the content of today's workshop. I'm gonna go ahead and close this window for now. We don't need this either. And I want to show you a quick diagram which essentially shows the elements that are included in the apps that we will go through today. On the top you can see the Minting web app. It makes use of Next.js. It makes use of the Moralis SDK as well as Moralis, the React Moralis SDK, which we will be importing into our next build. And what happens really from a logical point of view is that at first there's a couple of call to action buttons in the web app, such as a login button to MetaMask, as well as an invocation form on the second page. It's a Minter page, which we're going to call Minter today, but we can really call it whatever our use case may be. And the first real action that happens here is the invocation in the context. So if we are actually uploading a file or minting a file, then we would invoke the mint transaction. If we would be logging in, we would actually invoke the authentication option. And once that is done, what MetaMask does is it actually starts a transaction through the smart contract, which we'll be going through today as well. And then we send information or the metadata of our specific ERC 721 token to IPFS, as well as save the information on chain. And finally, if we were to build a game client, we can then use the different ways of importing information, whether that is the Cronos Play ChainSafe SDK, or Moralis. That is totally up to you. Feel free to use any tool you really prefer to get started to then import the information directly into the game. Also, don't worry, I'm going to share all of this later on with you. So this information is obviously going to be shared with you to help you getting started if that's an area that you want to explore. Cool. I think before we even start to do anything, for those that haven't done it yet, you can actually add the Cronos chains into your MetaMask account. If you go to cronos.org play, all you have to do is click on the Add Cronos Network button, and then it will automatically set up everything. In my case, I have set this up already, so there is no need to add stuff. So I'm just gonna show you how this is gonna look like. So let me have a look. Go to our settings, and on the network, all you have to do is click on the Add Network button, and in here there's different networks that you can add. if you want to, for example, add the testnet, which we're going to use today, all you would have to do is, let's say, call the network name Cronos testnet, and then we're going to add the RPC URL for the endpoint. Then what we want to add is the chain ID, which is 338, and as a symbol I would go ahead and add tcrow. And finally, if you want to add an explorer, we could add the there's actually two explorers. One is the Cronos Scan Explorer, and because this is the Cronos testnet, I want to use the prefix testnet so that actually I can click directly and be redirected to the right Cronos Scan environment, which in this case is the testnet. So what's happening here is the URL is currently used by Cronos testnet network. This is because I have set it up already. If that was not the case, you would be able to just proceed and save and have this network added to your MetaMask. That's all good. So in fact, if we come back here, you will see that I have Cronos testnet already added. That's my testnet address. And yeah, that's it. This is how you can add the Cronos network to your address. I think many of you might have done this already, but I think it's a good chance to quickly go through it again for those that haven't. And I think second step that I would do is I want to get some testnet funds. And to do this, what I want to do is I can go to the cronos.org/faucet page, and then I just add my testnet address in here and get my test crow. And here we go. Usually that should happen quite fast. And here we go, it has been added already. Good. I think now we should have everything we need to actually move to the smart contract piece. But before I go to the smart contract, I'm going to share this with you. This is the repository that we have created. You will see that most of the information is in here. What you can do is after this hackathon session, you can just go ahead and clone it. You will have the Solidity contract in here, but you also have a template app, which is basically empty, and the finished app that you can use. But if you want to get your hands on starting from scratch, feel free to use the empty template app, which is what we're going to do today. And whenever you get stuck, you can use the actual finished app. Cool. Okay. So this is the actual contract which we want to deploy. In my case, I have deployed it already, but I might want to go through it again, just for you to get the sense of what happened here. It's purely based on the Open Zeppelin contract formats. So that's what we're using. It's obviously best practice, and most companies and most projects are using the Open Zeppelin standards and formats because it's really easy to integrate, and it makes cross-platform implementation much more straightforward and easy and streamlined. Okay, let me actually go through all of this. So again, you can find the contract itself directly in the repository if you want to deploy it. But essentially what happens here is we use a contract, that's the name of the contract. And what we're doing is we want to make a multiple inheritance from the 3 different extension contracts that we get from Open Zeppelin in this specific scenario. However, there is a really cool tool that you can play around with. It's called wizard.zeppelin. I think if you haven't yet just have a look. It's quite straightforward. It's easy to use. It's a really cool playground. It will help you, to get started with some basics, but you can also go ahead and just copy what we have in the GitHub repository. Okay. So basically the ERC 721 contract that we have in here is basically the core and metadata extension with a base URI mechanism in it. And the other two is so the enum contract is basically the enum extension, as the name suggests, and the second one is basically taking care of metadata storage. What we're doing here is, so I didn't add the counter. It wasn't necessary for this workshop, so to speak. So it's something you can add if you want. You will find it actually in the wizard version. But essentially, we use our state variable as an unassigned integer because we want the state of this to contain only positive numbers as well as 0. And then also we want to make it public, which means that Solidity is actually automatically creating the getter function. And then internal functions, or variables can only be used internally or by derived contracts. And that's why it's important to make sure that this part here is public. And then the constant piece basically means that the state variables that are defined as constant will have their values assigned, basically at the compile time, and will not allow for any modifications that might happen, during runtime, for example. Then the next thing that we should have a look at is actually the different hooks that we have here. These are default hooks that we created also following the Open Zeppelin standards. The first one is basically, if you can see this one, it's basically the one that takes care of the before token transfer mechanism. And just, for you to get a sense, hook that is called, basically, this is a hook that is called before any token transfer happens, such as the minting process, for example. Cool. Then I think in the interest of time, I'm just gonna walk you through the different elements. So you have also the token URI, you have the support interface, and then in the end, after the constructor, where you're gonna name your specific contract and as well the symbol for it, you will have a function for minting the actual NFT. And once you are happy with the contract, all you have to do is obviously make sure that you have I have the latest version. The compiler version is the same as the version that you use here on top. And after you compile your contract, you will actually have your contract listed in here so that you can take its ABIs, which we'll need in a minute, once you want to start to build your decentralized apps. And another very important point is the environment. You need to make sure here that you select MetaMask as your injected provider. And you will see that the account is selected automatically. And also as contract option, you will have to make sure that you select the contract that you just created. And once you deploy your contract, you will have obviously a confirmation here in the bottom, and you will see the different functions that have been deployed with the contract. And these functions are the ones that we actually want to use in the Minter app, which I will walk you through in a minute. Okay. So if you actually have a look at the Explorer that I mentioned before, you will see that the contract, once it's deployed, you can actually go and check the contract and see what's happening. You will see all the different contract calls that have been happening in the different from different wallets. For example, in this case, it's just me. You have the different block heights, and you have the different information that are relevant for the different NFTs. So, for example, if I select one of these transactions, I can see that there is a token ID, some information about from where it originated, with who it interacted with, and what tokens the tokens that have been minted. So if I click on this one, for example, I will see an image and the information. If I go, let me actually have a look. If I go to another token, select instance, let's actually go to instance 0, which was the first NFT that I minted with this contract. That's one of the items that I created. Initially, it's a sprite that you can use. It's actually an image, but you can, transform it into a game object and then a sprite in Unity. Once you start to work, on your Unity build, all you have to do is input the sprite, the image, and then convert it to a sprite object. Okay. Now, the next step before we head into our app is we want to create a Moralis server. So I have created mine already. But the important thing here is when you create it, you have to select Cronos. And in the environment, you can choose if you want to use the mainnet, you use the mainnet. If you want to use the testnet, make sure you use the testnet. And then we can go ahead and use our app, the app URL, and the application ID, which we will need in a minute once we head into our Next.js application. I'm gonna go ahead and close this. And yeah, I think now it's time to actually get our hands on the starter app. So I've already cloned the app as we speak before starting the session today. And I want to go and select my starter template, open it in Visual Studio Code. And yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to do first. So the very first thing is we need to create a contract JS file or JS, depending what you use. Actually, we go out from here because I think I was not in the root folder. Now I am. And in here, I want to create two variables. One I'm going to call contract address. And the other one I want to call contract ABI. And all we have to do here is basically, if you come back here to, let's say, for example, Solidity, all we have to do is we have to select the ABI here in the bottom. And paste it in here. And then we want to add the contract that we deployed, the contract address. And that's our contract address and our contract ABI. Let's close this. And yeah, another important thing is we want to add our environment variables, which we will need very soon. And what we want to add specifically is the server URL and the app ID, which we can get by, if you remember, a couple of minutes ago, I was in the Moralis dashboard, and after creating my Cronos testnet app, I was able to get my server URL and my app ID, and that's the ones that I've just here imported into my environment file. Let's close this. And what will actually happen if I start this app right now is not much, because it's basically just an empty button for now. But as you see, there's already some styling added, so some graphics and stuff like that, and that's because we created the default starter app by adding already styling and all the stuff to make it easier for you to simply go ahead and clone and start to work on the essential part of the app. All right. First things first, after creating the contract and environment file, now we actually want to wrap the main component with the Moralis provider. And we have to pass our server URL as well as our app ID. And all we have to do here is basically, if you come back to our environment file, what we're going to do is we want to use process environment and then pass the server URL, and the same goes for the app ID. And we also want to import the library. Cool. And that's our Moralis provider wrapper. That's it in the main app file, which you can close. And still not much is going to happen here, because this file here, all it has is a description, some styling, an image, and a button that doesn't do much, as you can see. So let's change that by what we want to do is we want to create, first of all, a couple of variables. And the first variable we want to use, we want to actually use an authentication state, which is implemented through use Moralis, very similar to the use state. And we also want to use a router, which comes natively in Next.js. And what we want to do, so the way we're going to use this is we will use effect to check conditionally if a user is authenticated or not. And should a user actually have authenticated with his wallet, then we want to push him directly to the page where he will be able to mint, let's say, some NFTs. And the way we will do this is we can use effect, and in here we want to check conditionally if the user is authenticated, and if yes, you're gonna say router push the session user to I'm gonna call it minter, but this could be any path you might want to use. And then what I have to do is in the button here, I want to actually create an on click that initiates the authentication flow. So basically now the button that we have here on this page, once we click on it, it will trigger MetaMask to authenticate. And then if the authentication process completes, we will be redirected to the minter page, which right now does not exist yet. So that's actually the next thing that we want to do. So in our pages directory, we create a new directory. We're gonna call it minter. And in here, what we want to do is just gonna copy this and remove all of these. And change the name of this component, page component, to minter. So what does this do? It actually creates a page, an empty page right now. So whenever you click on here, I will be able to authenticate, but I will not be rerouted to the page because the page is not created yet. So what I'm gonna do is in the interest of time, I want to import the full page that we have for the minter from the completed app, like so. And then I have to do a couple of things. I created a utils folder, which I copied to my app. It basically includes simple things such as logos and other variables that we can reuse. And then we should have most of the app built. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to refresh here. Let's try again. Sign. Let's actually try to disconnect for a second. Okay, it did not push me to... Oh, I see, yes. This is missing.
Rick, is there any way we can zoom in just a little bit on the code there?
Sure. Let me actually try to... I have a very big screen. We try to make the screen maybe a little bit smaller. How does this look?
Yeah, that's a little bit better there. If we could go one size larger, maybe. Yes, there we go. Thank you.
Sure, no worries. Okay. Let's see if it's fixed now. Yeah, for some reason he doesn't bring me to the next page. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna close the starter app for a second and just run the finished app. And here we go. So the next thing that you see is actually the form with some description, some information about you know, the stuff that you can do. So once you want to create your items, for example, for a game, you would give them a name, a description, and obviously the file that you want to upload as well. Before I do that, I quickly want to go through the code. So essentially what happens here is you have the same information, you have the same type of authentication options from user Moralis. With the difference, you have an option for logout, you have an option for user, and we're still going to use the router option in here. And then we have the variables for the states for the form that we want to use. We have a state for the name, for the description, and for the file that we will be uploading. And then additionally, we still use the use effect to check if the user is still authenticated, and if he's not authenticated, we push him back to the route to the landing page. And most of the logic is being taken care of the onSubmit function in here, which is an asynchronous function, which we use once we are ready to submit the form in order to upload and mint the NFT. And what's happening here is we try to use the try and catch block to check if there's any errors, and then log the errors in the browser if needed. And we also want to actually save the image that I mentioned, you know, the diagram that we had to look before. We want to save the image to IPFS by using the Moralis namespace in here, which is imported to the Moralis package. And then we want to get the URL of the image. And once we get the URL, what happens here is we also want to upload the data onto the chain. And then, you know, Moralis is taking care of the conversion. It's basically constructing the metadata with the NFT name, with the description, as well as the image. And then what happens within the logic is that this data is going to be converted into a JSON string, and then it's basically converted into a base 64 string. And yeah, this way Moralis can convert the file and save it to IPFS, as well as making it accessible to the blockchain. And if something goes wrong, then we will have an alert, which is going to be logged. The error is going to be logged in the console, but you will also have an alert in the browser. As for, you know, the HTML part, it's straightforward. I think it's self-explanatory. We have a form the form has an onSubmit function in here. Then we have our different inputs. We take the onChange target value and set it in the value that we have for our name state. Same goes for description as well as for the different images that we want to upload. And then finally we have our mint button and the logout button. So why don't we go ahead and test this? Now the transaction is happening. You can check it here in MetaMask. It's still pending, but as soon as this is finished, usually you get an alert here in the browser. Here you go with the contract address. So this is our item being created, and if I go and check this in, let's say let's use Cronos Scan for a second. We will see the contract transaction, and we see that there happened something 43 seconds ago. Now we can do this also by using the other explorer, Cronos Explorer. We'll also see that there was a transaction a minute ago. Go and check it, and that's the token ID in here. And here we go, that's the item that we just uploaded. And yeah, now that we minted the legendary Knight helmet, next thing that we want to actually do is I actually want to test this in Unity very quickly to show you what this means from a Unity perspective. I created already a workshop project in here, so I'm going to start this up. And as you can see, my quad is already set in here, which is my standard object now for the sake of this example. And what I want to do specifically is I want to import the item that we just created, and to do that I will have to replace the contract in here. And as you remember, the token ID is 8, and I also use the RPC string for the RPC option that we'll require in order to generate the item. So what happens really here from a logic perspective is we check if the URI starts with IPFS, and because it does, what will happen is that by default it uses the IPFS protocol, which is not always working perfectly, and we just replace it with the HTTPS method. And then what we want to, let me open the screen actually a little bit. We want to create a Unity web request. We await it, then we create a response for the data that we want, and in here we want to create a download handler for the data. And once the JSON is fetched from the URI that we created in here, the URI from the chain, then we want to parse the JSON to get the image URI in here. And once we have that, we still gonna check for the IPFS, because that's sometimes a bit of a troublemaker, and we replace it with the HTTPS method. And then we fetch the image and display it in the game and replace, the game object. We get the component that we want to replace, and then we just replace it with the texture that we have from the NFT. So I'm going to close this again, go back to Unity, I'm going to change the stuff that we did, and I'm just going to run this very quick. And now my quad has been replaced by the legendary Knight helmet. Okay. And with an eye on time, I think we still have a little bit of time to show you something very quick. Let me close this. There's a video of something that I did some time ago. I actually showed this in some other workshops. It's about it's basically a top-down RPG game that uses the Daniel Thomas collection, which I find quite cool. So I thought it was a good example to put this actually into context. And unfortunately there was some problems with the video, so what I will be doing is I will just talk you through the video for simplicity's sake. And yeah, let me have a look. Okay, so that's the Daniel Thomas collection basically that we import in here. It's really simple. It's an kind of open world, top-down kind of game. You see a couple of elements on the map. You have a coin. That's the scene. And obviously you have the different avatars here on the map, the main character and the different knights and Vikings and various that you can see across the map. And yeah, that is actually a function that is used, to use stuff like the faucet that is daily, that can be used daily, that we use with an API, and it's basically used. This function is basically going to use the same functionality that we saw when I used the faucet today to send the coins to the Tescrow coins to my new MetaMask wallet account. The same could be applied in the context of gaming. So if you wanted to build something like a rewarding mechanism for users and players that log in daily, that's something you could do by using this type of mechanism. So there's many different ways of doing this. I think using web requests is one way. You store the backend logic in a backend API, and then you have the client to basically take care of client-side functionalities. So this game is basically built using WebGL, because I think for simplicity's sake it's good. It's a good example to showcase how to use stuff like MetaMask and these sort of functionalities in the browser. It's faster to build, and yeah, I think it's a good example to show you some of the things that could be possibly done using the Cronos Play SDK as well. First thing is the enter button, which is pretty much the same thing we saw in the Moralis Next.js app. This one uses Web3 modal, and for the purpose of this game, we're gonna go ahead and use MetaMask to authenticate. And yeah, then you have stuff like, one thing that you can do is have an avatar on the top for your account address and your balance. which is being updated in real time. There's different ways of doing that, but I'm not going to go now into the details of how to do that. I think you might know that even better than me, so I leave that up to you. First thing that we want to do is here in the map, go ahead and pick up a coin, which possibly I'm going to send to another address. So in the context of a real game, this could be another user to which I want to transfer some of my coins. So I'm going to do that, go ahead and send him 1 crow. Now in this example, the address was hard-coded. It's another address of myself, but it could be the address of another player. Balance decreases in real time. As you can see, it went from 122 to 121. And in the meantime, I imported the game items, which I could go and equip. Now there's different mechanisms to do that. The image itself, it's stored on IPFS off-chain as well as on-chain, and then you can use different technologies in the game and different scripts to let's say change direction, or even when you create the ERC 721 token, you can basically create a set of different sprites and then basically decompose them in the game and then via script change the description of the item. Some other games use other mechanisms, such as having off-chain data and on-chain data, and combining basically those two types of data to make the gameplay as efficient as possible. So yeah, that's just a simple top-down RPG example, but I also want to quickly show you the rewarding mechanism that I mentioned before, which I think it's quite cool because many game studios are working on this type of things. So I'm gonna spool a little bit ahead because that's something we don't need to wait for. So I'm gonna run this in this video. I run this directly from the editor because of some course restrictions, which can be set actually directly on the back end. In this case, they have been set in a way that they would not be allowed in the browser. So for that reason, we will just show you how this works in the editor. So what will happen here is the player goes and picks it up, the coin, and you will see that some funds have been sent to the address in the same way it was done previously in the false that we saw in the beginning of the workshop. And here you can see how the address of the player actually updates in real time as well once he receives the funds from the faucet. Cool. And with this was just an example, I think. But I think what I want to do next is, I think I'm going to pause it here now. I see we still have around 6 minutes. But I want to pause it here and give the space back to Phil and attendees and see if there's any questions that you might have before we head to Gathertown.
Well, thank you so much, Rick. That was a really great presentation on and a really great kickoff to our workshops. I know that we have some questions in the chat already regarding the methods we just saw versus how some of these methods might be different with Moralis 2.0. Let's hold all of those until we get into Gathertown. In about 10, 15 minutes, we're going to move over to Gathertown, and Yosef, along with the community engineers, are going to run a second question and answer there. Now, aside from Moralis 1.0 versus 2.0 questions, we're happy to take any questions in the chat right now on the live stream. I know we have Spencer on the moderation side. Spencer, did we have any questions that came in while we were talking that maybe we can highlight now?
Well, a lot of the questions were answered in the chat, but there were some questions about if the repository would be public.
Yes, the repositories will be public, so we will share them with you. I don't know the dynamics, I think we will be able to share them in Town, and I think please go ahead, clone them, start to work on them. Hopefully they're going to be helpful, but sure, we will be sharing. They will be public.
And Rick, if you want to send me a link to the repository, I can add it to the description for this video as well for anybody
Absolutely.
who's watching later on.
Good
Perfect.
idea. Let's do that.
A couple people are asking for your social media. Do you keep a public Twitter, Rick?
Yes. So it's basically how can I? It's basically my. It's like this.
You can share it in the chat if you like. If you type into the comments chat here on our right, that'll show up publicly for everyone. We try to keep links out of there, but usernames are okay.
Give me a second. Because, yeah, it's a tricky one because I changed my username recently, but you should find me like this. That's my
Oh, I don't
username.
think you're still sharing your screen.
I see. Do you know where I can share the text actually? I think in the comments.
Let's see. Oh, I see. You shared it. Yep. Let me move it over. So this is on Twitter at.
Yeah, that's basically my one username that I use across all the different social media profiles. Discord, Twitter, GitHub, and the likes. So it's rar-sieve basically.
Perfect. Yep.
But we
So
can add that to the link as well once the YouTube video is uploaded.
Got a kind of a general question here. Do you have any advice for new starters? Maybe advice for people starting with Cronos for the first time, or Moralis for that matter?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think the advice that I would always give is ask questions, because I think there's a huge support in the community. Ask all the questions. There's no stupid question. There's just good questions which the community is always going to be keen to answer. And also, start with the easy things and then work yourself up. As a matter of fact, I started Unity from scratch less than a year ago. But I found it interesting, so I think there's a lot that you can learn in different technologies. I think the curiosity, be always curious to learn and be always curious to ask questions, I think are really good advices that I would like to give.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. It's ambition really goes a long way, and we're in emerging tech. So all of us are very ambitious people already. And when you're asked to build within an emerging technology or build on a blockchain that is less than 2 years old, that's a high challenge. And so make no mistake. I mean, in this hackathon, we're asking people to do things which really haven't been done much before. And that's what makes it exciting. So if you are one of those new people, keep the questions coming. And if you're not getting the questions you're looking for, reach out in our Discord. If you run across me, you can ask me directly. I'll be mostly in GatherTown, but occasionally in Discord as well. Got a question about WebGL. And the question is it available only on WebGL to run directly in the browser? How can we bring it to iOS or Android? So he's wondering if you wanted to deploy the same dApp for mobile users. Is that something that can be easily done?
Yes. Okay. So this is a really good question. As a matter of fact, you can choose how you want to build it. You can choose to build in WebGL. I think WebGL brings the magic of easy integrations with stuff like Web3 model when you want to create this type of extensions. Nevertheless, you have information in the Cronos SDK as well as I think in Moralis in terms of deploying your builds for Android and iOS applications. In regards to I think the question is more related to the Unity part versus the Minter part. But the same applies obviously to, if you wanted to create a decentralized app for your mobile device, then you could do that. The good thing about, provider methods such as MetaMask or Wallet Connect is that they natively identify when an app is running on the browser and when on the computer and when it's running on a mobile device. And as a result, if you have the app installed like MetaMask or your wallet installed on your mobile device, you will natively see the connection in your decentralized app. So that's the long answer. The short answer is yes, you can also use the SDK to build for Android or iOS.
Perfect. Now, I think we got time for one more question here before we move to GatherTown. After this last question, we're going to take about a 10-minute intermission, and then we'll resume question and answer in GatherTown in the auditorium. For our last question here, this one is kind of a follow-up on the other one. Do I need to use Unity? And I know that the short answer is no, that it is possible to use other game engines as well. Now, if you're using the Moralis 1.0 method, which is more what we were demonstrating here, that's where a lot of the Unity integration is already built out. I'd like to get a little further into that once we move to GatherTown. But Rick, if you had anything to add on that, let me know.
Sure, no, absolutely. I think you summarized it quite well. You don't have to use Unity for your client or for your game. You have the freedom to choose whatever technology and framework you want, because essentially what happens, everything that happens in the blockchain, you can import it into your client by using any framework or technology of choice. There is some examples of Unreal Engine in our SDKs already, if this is something that you might be interested in. But I think the opportunities are just limitless right now.
A lot of the tutorials that we've run so far have to do with Unity. Now, whether or not that'll continue in the future, and if we branch out to other game engines in our tutorials, remains to be seen. But I would say that in the scope of this hackathon, if you're familiar with one, go with that one, because a lot of the things that we're trying to achieve with game development can be done in a few different game engines, and it really comes down to method and preference. So keep that in mind. You don't have to learn all of them. You don't have to learn Unreal Engine and Unity. Pick one and make that your focus, especially until you reach the limits of what you're able to do with that, and then maybe from there branch out. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rick. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. This was a wonderful kickoff to our workshops. We're going to have more of these this week and next week. The next workshop starts tomorrow, earlier in the day. So look forward to seeing everybody there for that event, and see everybody in GatherTown in about 10 minutes. Have a great rest of the day.
See everyone. Thanks.